I'm thankful for being introduced to TRE after the crash, where I had come to an understanding that I'm operating with safety-seeking patterns that are provided to me by myself and my external world as a child,
Right.
and they're not necessarily healthy for me, however functional they are in my adult life. And when that has crashed, bringing in TRE actually changed a lot for me, connecting to the body.
Welcome to the Redbeard Embodiment Podcast. I am your host, Alex Greene, and I'm on a mission to bring the power of embodiment to people all around the world. In this podcast, we explore how embodiment practices, trauma healing, and knowledge about the human nervous system can help us find our ground, discover new sources of meaning, and create connection in an ever-changing world. The deepest change is embodied change.
Hello, everybody. I am excited to be sitting down today for a conversation with Petter Larsson. And Petter is a colleague, and Petter, I consider you a friend. Well, we haven't met in person, but we've certainly been on a lot of phone and Zoom conversations over the years. So Petter is in the very, very south of Sweden, just south of Malmö, Sweden. And I'm in Boulder, Colorado, as always. And Petter and I served on the TRE for All board several years back during the height of the COVID years. And so this was the reason for our frequent meetings when we were serving in that capacity. And Petter has a very interesting background, and part of what we'll be discussing today is how he came to learn about the nervous system and the kind of neurogenic tremoring that comes out of TRE. But his own personal story is he has a very a long career in Swedish national security and intelligence, and spent a lot of time traveling all around the world in that work. And then at a certain point, and he can tell us a little bit about the story, he knew he needed to attend to his own nervous system after the kind of work he had been doing. And that has led him into perhaps a second chapter of his career, where he is the director and co-founder of an organization, a firm that does an advisory firm for risk management, cybersecurity, and information security, based in Sweden and partnered with international organizations, as well as his work doing leadership coaching and nervous system work and stress management work on a one-on-one level. So that's just a little bit about Petter. And Petter, super happy to sit down and hear your story today. I'll just mention one more comment. One of the themes that I'm hoping to discuss today with Petter is he made an interesting comment the last time we spoke, which is that he's has come to learn that stress management is risk management. And in his work as somebody who thinks a lot about risk management in a broad sense of the term, what are the risks for a team or an organization or a country? He has some very interesting thoughts around how stress management should be considered carefully within a context of risk management. And so that's a little bit of one of the major themes that we'll be covering today. But in any case, Petter, happy to sit down with you today. Thanks so much.
Very much, Alex, and it's of course a pleasure and an honor to be part of this project and meet you. And indeed, I also consider you a friend. So thank you for that. Now we know.
Now we've made it official. That's good. So I wonder if we could start, Petter, with just sort of kind of a basically background, maybe just share, sort of a little bit about your own personal history, a little bit about the kind of work you were doing, and then how you came to become curious about nervous system work and whether that began with tremoring or something else. Maybe you could just share a bit of your personal journey that led you up to the work you're doing now.
Yeah, I'll be happy to. And I also understand that this is part of the purpose of the podcast. So I do understand that the invite having me here is, of course, about elaborating a little on a on a fellow traveler in this journey called life, and of course it's unique to me, and I don't express any opinions or thoughts from anyone but myself, of course. So that's a standard quote. But for me, I could make this a little bit complex and complicated, and I think I will do that, Alex. So
I was going to say I would urge you to go with the complicated. We want to hear the story.
because we are talking about, like you and me and any other human being, it is a complex mix, and also perhaps at times a complicated mix. Sometimes a complex mix, but not so complicated. Let me get into the details. So it would be easy for me to just start elaborating on a career in what we in Sweden would call national security in the first couple of years in the military system, and then moving on into the National Security Service, working with national missions and objectives, but also supporting the international security setting with other countries' security services or whatever organizations. So that would have been the easy thing, elaborating on a multi-year career around that, traveling to places like Mogadishu or Kabul or anywhere in Pakistan or wherever, places in Africa at times.
Sure.
Apart from working back home in my country, Sweden, or in Europe, with whatever operation or project in a high risk, not so much high risk for me as an employee of that kind of organization, but dealing with individuals who themselves take risks to do stuff for us.
I see.
So that would be what's called in the collection department of that kind of business. You need to create and foster and manage personal relationships with people outside of your organization, but better positioned to provide whatever assistance or information that is considered needed. And this is, of course, a very close work where you work very close with people under severe stress. They feel that they are challenging their own values for doing things for a better common good or higher good, and lots of variables for them. And this would be very easy for me to talk about and mention stress. However, if we focus on this individual's journey, it's, I think, even more interesting. How did you end up in that work, and what did that do to you? Because, and you have to stop me if I'm getting too complex there, Alex. So
no, I already like where it's going. Please proceed.
Because there is a Petter version 1 no longer around, and there is a Petter version 2 perhaps sitting here now. I don't know if I'm going into version 3. Who knows? but anyhow, I was mostly brought up by my mother. Parents divorced around a sensitive age, I think close to 4 years old. So me and my sister, our parents split up, and we had during the whole childhood and the rest of the formative years up to around 7, we saw our father not so much. He was living in another part of the country, and me as the oldest child, definitely I know now that I definitely had an urge to reconnect with the father, so to speak.
Sure.
Bringing me into a little bit of a mix of a rigid personality and a more enduring kind. Being a little bit afraid of if I show my true emotions or my true reactions, what can happen? I learned to maybe hide it a little, or not hide, but wait a little. It's become an endurance thing, so to speak. the rigidity of the personality would tell me that you need to perform in order to get that sense of safety or love that you need as a child. So
Sure.
to try to make that short, which is impossible, but I'm doing my best here. That mix of the endurer and rigid personality also creates a young individual excellent in sensing what's going on in the room, what's going on in relationships between adults in the room and
Right.
adults not yet in the room or previously in the room. So
Right.
I have a natural, and what you call when a musician is has this natural intuitive perfection in his music work. There's a certain word for that. You have a absolute, in Sweden we call it
The perfect pitch in
something like that.
English.
I
Yeah,
had the
perfect
perfect pitch when it comes to my homemade word relationeering.
Okay.
You know, how to
Yep.
understand relationships and how to navigate in them. So I think this is a short backgrounder comment, because with that comment, I don't think anyone is surprised that I ended up in the espionage business, where relationships are absolutely central in to be efficient and to move mountains in that world. You need to have super skills in relationeering. If you follow me, Alex. Yeah.
Right.
So
I follow you.
I
Yep.
was performing since childhood. What I did since childhood, I know now, was try to reconnect with my father. Actually, he was very much not present, and there were other complex details around his new family, stuff like that. Made me as a young child and as a young teenager really put in an effort to perform and trying to be a perfect child, to fit in. And if I fit in, then I get the love I seek and the attention.
Right.
This is for me central in the way I look at my young years.
Right. Yeah, your
And
character development, so to speak.
yeah, and
Yeah.
then it's also very central for me when I look back and try to understand what the hell happened as I, in my sub 40s, pretty close to 40, just absolutely crashed as a human being from a somatic perspective, from the body.
Yeah.
Because I kept on like a Formula One car since childhood into the teens, across the teens, through the teens, and up, a young juvenile male. I
Yep.
would say when I look at the resume, there is nothing in that resume where I feel that I am, hard to say, but I'm not proud of it particularly. Even it's a inhuman resume. It looks like I've had 3 jobs, 3 careers. It's
Yeah.
it's massive, the amount of pressure I put on myself to try to get that attention or try to fit in. So it's, what I'm saying is, a very dysfunctional safety and love seeking pattern.
Okay.
But
Okay.
the carrier, this human being, was completely unaware that this was going on. So I stormed into my 20s, into my 30s, and come to the end of the 30s, stuff started to happen. I didn't realize that if I came from having changed aircrafts in Istanbul at some trip, and my colleagues flew back to Stockholm where they lived, and I was going to fly to the nearest airport for where I lived was Copenhagen, taking the train 20 minutes across the strait into Sweden. I didn't necessarily go home that night, it might end up that I went out for some working meetings. So very unhealthy from a stress management perspective behavior.
Yeah.
And I know one Thursday when I arrived at home to my at the time wife, the mother of my children. I have two children. I told her, hey, I lost my eyesight on one of my eyes. I can't see anything, but I was too tense and too, on red, as I say, to even realize that this was a serious. This was actually an issue.
Right,
so for me, it's just, okay, malfunction in the eyes is a problem, need to sleep. I went to sleep, and the other day it was gone. And a couple of days later, I mentioned this to my mother, actually. Hey, you know what? My eye didn't really work the other night. And wise as she is, she immediately sent me to the ER, of course, where they took care of this. Of course, they wanted to know if there was a bleeding or anything like that in the brain or something more serious, which it was not. So not even with that kind of events, this guy realized that there's something wrong in the way you live your life. I kept on for a few years. I guess I now know that I only increased in intensity. And I know I woke up I started to my, gut, the stomach, nothing really worked, but I didn't understand why. I know I was under pressure and stress, mostly from myself again. And one morning I woke up really early, took off for the loo, and completely collapsed. I just felt a super sensation in my lower back. And it, I remember, I recall I had this thought, hey, what's going on in my lower back? And I reached with my hand, and then I just had this sensation that something was going straight up my spine. And then it was lights out for me. And unfortunately, I fell quite hard. So that made the consequence of, it was blood everywhere, and like a toilet, bathroom floor. You don't need much blood it looks like a horror movie.
Right.
Anyway, the sound of me landing on that floor had intuitively woke up my, at that time, wife, even if she was sleeping a couple of rooms away. So she described it like something just woke her up. And she immediately had a head to the toilet and charged the door to find me there. And then a very serious chapter in her and my life initiated, where she and the children believed I was perhaps not alive anymore, and it was a real traumatic event for us. And our two boys, they woke up one by one, and entering this scene, and there was ambulance and stuff. I woke up pretty soon, so it was not. We experienced this situation much more severe than it really were.
I see.
So I was taken to the hospital, and they did all their checks and examinations, and I was informed that we cannot find anything with you. There's nothing wrong. We don't even really see that this is only my memories, so the exactness of it all, who knows? Memories often fail you. But as I recall, the message was, we don't even see clear signs of burnout in you. So we hear that you say you're stressed out and you need to change the way you live your life like this. But from a medical point of view, we just can't see this. So but there's one thing, Petter. We noticed when we examined your lower back that there is a small, more on the in the beauty sector, so to speak. It's something we need to remove. It's not, I don't recall what it was. It's something like a hair or something that has turned around, and it
Ingrown
needed to be
hair or something like that. Yeah.
something needed to be removed, but absolutely not dangerous at all. So extreme low prio. In
Right.
my black and white world, where I was on red, green, yellow, orange, red, was I were operating on red. There's
Right.
only black and white, friend or threat or not. So I
Right.
immediately understook it that they have, of course, lied to me, and I have cancer.
I see. Yep.
So that was what my system told me, that you definitely have extremely dangerous cancer, and they will remove it, stuff like that. And still
Yep.
to this
Yep.
day, I can almost recall and feel the feeling of really high tension I had in my body at that time. I can feel it as we now speak, and
Sure.
I'm glad I'm not there now. So this
Yep.
chronic tension is doing you no good.
Yep.
And those months where I waited for that surgical removal of this thing was absolutely horrible for me. That's where I entered and experienced these anxiety, panic attacks, stuff like this, real anxiety attacks. It was absolutely a nightmare. I wish no one to experience a panic attack in full bloom. For me, it was absolutely frightful. It came on me like a storm out of nowhere, and I had zero experience about this. And the strange thing, Alex, is that during all these years in that kind of work, I was always number one in helping other people with these kind of issues.
Yep.
So with stress or trauma-related incidents, people who got wounded or extremely difficult situations, I was always number one, providing support, providing human relationship, being there. But the difference here is when it was about myself, I was complete newbie. I had no clue. So I know from the education that this whole life event brought me, I entered trainings and various situations where I've come to learn a lot about myself. And one of the therapists told me that, you know what, there's a very simple 4-level model that is good to bring with you.
For you regular listeners to the podcast, you know that about half of these episodes focus on TRE, tension and trauma releasing exercises. And I wanted to make sure that you know about the Redbeard TRE certification program, our educational platform to certify others. And we have both an online version of that I teach, as well as an in-person version of the training that my colleague Ellen McKenzie teaches in Madison, Wisconsin. My next online certification training is beginning August 3rd and 4th, 2024. That's the first of 3 modules. And the way the certification program works is it's about a 10 to 12 month program divided into 3 phases of learning, each with a weekend connected to it, and then some one-on-one work with me and people on my team to support your learning journey. TRE has been a life-changing modality for myself. It's open to people with any background. I wanted to make sure you know about the program. You can find more information at redbeardtre.com.
So in relation to yourself and whatever theme you're talking about, in this case, your skill level of taking care and understanding yourself, you could always start by being unaware of your incompetence. And you can operate there for years. And you can if life serves you, you can move up to being aware of your incompetence. Perhaps I entered that phase when I understand that I'm at the hospital now and there is something not working with me. Could it be the physical body, or could it be the way I live my life, or could it be something much more deeper?
Right.
And then just to conclude that model, the third one, as you already are well aware, being aware of your competence when you have actually learned something around whatever theme we're talking about, and you start to act in a conscious way, but it's not supernatural for you, but you still do it. You're motivated,
Right.
and you have the knowledge, and you have access to mentors or instructors or people around you supporting you. And then, of course, as you have integrated it, you might move on to the stage of being unaware of your competence, meaning you have integrated a new way of living your life. It's
Right.
super simple, but there is also some depth to this kind of 4 model. So I
I
like it a lot.
love that model a lot. Yeah.
And I use it actually pretty much in my normal work. Even if you speak about cybersecurity in a large organization or whatever theme, you have these 4 steps. So yeah, so that's what happened, and I waited for the surgery those couple of months, and it was terrifying. It came finally the day where they were going to remove this thing, and I know I was walking around in the waiting area just before the surgery, and there was another man there, and he was absolutely nervous. Can you say frantic? I don't know if that's the word. He was
Frantic,
everywhere.
sure.
He was everywhere. He was, my robot eyes were, okay, very nervous person, need to be aware. And
Right.
I didn't really, I also recall me feeling in myself internally that, look at that. Why is he so, why that nervousness? I was in that waiting room, or what to call it, and we were all prepped up for surgery. Him and I, we had 2 different tracks, and I realized this is a super nervous individual.
Right.
And now it's a bit funny when I look back, feel and think back about the situation, because obviously I was again super unaware of my own incompetence in relation to this.
Right.
So he was seeking contact with the nurses. I heard him say to her that, or to them, that, hey, I'm super nervous. I'm not comfortable. He addressed his emotions.
Right.
And for me, I was like, okay, look at this guy. And they were giving him something to calm him down, I guess. And then it was time to enter the room, the surgery room, for me.
Right.
And coming in, I recall I said hello to all the staff. Of course, it was one of those instances where there were students from the medical training,
Right.
beautiful girls in my own age, of course. And I was having this surgery in the lower back and more. So they put me on this on the bed. And before that, they connected me to these heart sensors.
I see.
And at that time, I had been a bit primed because the previous round of examinations, a couple of months before, every night was the single thing, because the hearts and these sensors they put on patients, they fired their alarm every night around 2 or 3 in the middle of the night, because my pulse was going too low, below some kind of threshold they had in that apparatus.
I see.
And every night a new team of nurses came bursting into my room at the hospital asking if I'm okay. And that sort of primed me that these damn sensors, they are no good for me.
Right.
Now we're back in the story. So they connected me with the sensors, and I got that same sensation from the lower back. like that I had in the toilet, in the beginning.
Yeah.
And I recall I had an opportunity to just seek eye contact with one of the nurses. And I remember I told her, hey, nurse, now you can, stand by because I'm passing out or something like that. And then it was black again.
Wow.
And then I do not recall anything until I woke up outside of the surgery, and another 10 or 14 days of examinations just restarted the whole thing again.
I see.
And the same results. We do not see any clinical signs of you being, there's no problem. You mentioned stress again. Might be, have a look at your life, and this kind of non-holistic way of looking at it. They checked my brain, they checked my lungs, my heart. No vital organs, no problem at all.
Right.
They did, however, on the recommendation of one of the nurses, actually, whom had, for some reason, worked at another hospital where some kind of stress experienced doctor had been working. So he or she, I can't recall, has been experienced by something called a tilt test, where you strap the patient. Are you aware of a tilt test?
No.
You strap the patients to a tiltable bed like this. So you put the patient here, you strap him on with some belts.
Yep.
And then quite suddenly you are being raised like this to a standing position.
Okay.
You're not raising yourself, so the bed is actually going from lying to standing.
I see.
And what happens is that's pretty much a buffer overflow of the whole system, of the nervous system and the balance and everything.
Sure.
So what it basically does is it provokes the nervous system.
Yep.
And what happened with me when my system was provoked, being on a chronical high level, it immediately went into any of the fight, flight, or faint or freeze system responses, so to speak. So after I was raised, immediately I just passed out again. So
I see. Interesting. Yeah.
That was pretty interesting. And at that time, they told me that now we know what your problem is. You have what we call a sudden faintness syndrome.
Okay.
So and the way we know about it is that you have been born with it. It's a syndrome that we don't know too much about.
Right.
So our understanding is that patients who are diagnosed with this, it's something they have it's been activating now for some reason, but you have it since birth.
Yep.
It's like a condition or what to call it. And I said to this doctor, and he said, you're very welcome. We will invite you to a special school, a special course and training for people suffering from this syndrome.
Yeah.
Sudden faintness syndrome. So you are hereby invited to a course and to learn how to live with the fact that you can, whenever, wherever, just faint.
Right.
And to me, this did not resonate at all. There was nothing intuitive in me. I did not bond with that kind of, it didn't feel right at all.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I was super grateful for the tilt test.
Right.
Because what the doctors didn't know was that the second time I ended up in the hospital after that surgery, some military colleagues, very much senior colleagues and instructors, reached out to me. Well, not in plural, one, and then another psychologist from another, from my previous network from my career, sort of, for reasons I don't really recall. I cannot really understand how they were informed, but good for me. They reached out, and I was actually taught TRE on lying in the hospital bed for those 2 weeks on the second interval.
Interesting.
So I was sent videos of WhatsApp videos, and hey, Petter, as soon as you're medically cleared,
Right.
let's do something. And he introduced me. It's a very near and close and warm friend.
Right.
Now. So I cannot say how much I appreciate that he reached out. And I really can't really explain how it happened, but some things are just meant to be.
Right.
So he actually trained me applying TRE by sending videos to me, instructing me how to do it. So I did that lying in the hospital bed.
Right.
Putting a lot of question marks on the nurses. They didn't really, what are you doing? Lying and vibrating and everything. So that was, but for me, you know what, Alex, the feeling I got from just starting to performing this exercise was something completely new.
Right.
I started to get in touch with, I definitely moved from the lowest step on that 4-step, the model that brought me upwards, and I connected somewhat with new emotions, and I of course I was a super amateur in leading myself at the time still, but very, very high impact on me, also on a cognitive perspective, because what I did get in that initial phase was space, sort of, within myself. Very flimsy way of saying it, but I can only say that this powerhouse I had in my chest that had driven me during all these years.
Right.
After initiating this exercise pretty soon and pretty clear, that calmed down, at least for a minute or two.
Right.
And that resonated with me a lot, I can tell you. But my human body was urging for more of that.
Right.
So
Right. Interesting. Yeah.
this is what I did. So back to the tilt test, given the diagnosis of sudden faintness syndrome, which I didn't believe for 1 second. I recall into myself, within my own inner dialogue, I just said, this is absolutely impossible. I've been roping down from buildings. I've been doing a lot of things in a very pressurized environment.
Right.
Having worked, and it's always worse during trainings.
Yeah.
Never a problem at all. So them telling me that this was with me from my birth, and I had, probably suffered from this before without even knowing it. It didn't feel right.
Didn't ring true at all. Yeah.
So I never went to that faintness course at all. I just ignored it.
Yeah.
And I focused.
It reminds me of for that experience of sitting up and then fainting. A term I hear a lot is vasovagal syncope. That's one sort of, and then also this POTS, postural orthostatic, something I forget at the moment, tachycardia or something. Yeah. But
no, it's the same. I would say it's definitely in the same page of that book. So you just have to be patient with my non-clinical terms.
Yeah. But I've worked with it a few times, and I've never heard the description where they believed it was present from birth. I've always understood it to be something that developed, usually as some form of burnout or stress response. And but it's interesting that they gave you this idea.
Yeah, but we also need to bear in mind that this was many years ago.
Okay.
So we definitely have to say that this was before a lot of fascinating research the last few years that
I
they
see.
didn't have access to.
I
So,
see. Yep.
and also in a hospital where they did not have a holistic burnout clinic or anything like
framework. Yeah, I understand. Yep.
they only went for the absolute vital part, brain, lung, heart, and
Yep.
killers. So I think we have to say that otherwise it wouldn't be fair.
Okay.
How I didn't really believe in that. So I at that time I was absolutely convinced in myself that this is a stress management issue. I do not take care of myself, and there is not only am I living unhealthy, but believing I'm living healthy.
Right.
It's also my safety-seeking pattern, my motherboard as an individual.
Yeah.
Made me ask a lot of questions. Typically, as you know, this is typical for many of us who have been down the line of some kind of burnout or whatever. I typically don't like the word burnout, even if it's super common, because it implicates that I think a burnout is extremely unique for each individual.
I see.
So I think it simplifies a little, because I do know from my work after this life-defining moment of mine that there are fellow humans that never leave this first step of being unaware of their incompetence. So they repeat a burnout process maybe 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
Only a few years separated.
Right.
And that for me is a bit tragic. And I
Right.
understand luxury I believe I had in encountering these experts, providing me this support network at the right time and everything. So
I see.
yeah. So basically that was when I encountered the modality TRE, actually.
Yeah.
And it stuck with me for a long time, and I was very active performing the TRE. And I think it's typical, but in my personality, I did not care 1 minute about the recommendations or doses of TRE. I was a heavy consumer.
All right. Yeah. Well, that's what.
And I think it's very important to say to your, of course, super competent listeners and
Right.
participants of the podcast, that this is typically one of the comments that's unique for me.
Right.
I think it's important that you follow the recommendations for TRE, so it doesn't become an overwhelming situation, stuff like that. But this individual, in my personality, it's just to hell with all that. I do this now 1000%.
Yeah.
So
that was my story too. I won't go into my story, but that I always joke with my TRE students that you can definitely take this to some extremes. But what's interesting, that the rule of thumb that we give now, it's worth sharing. The rule of thumb that we offer for beginners is to pace we do provide some guidelines, typically for the first month of practice or the first dozen sessions approximately. Ideas like not going more than 15 minutes and maybe more than. So we are sort of conservative for that onboarding period, so to speak. However, what we typically say is, once you've gotten through that conservative onboarding period, you will have learned quite a bit about yourself, and you might learn that you might even need less than the recommended dosage, or you might learn that that was fine, and in fact you're craving much more longer sessions or more frequent sessions. And then this is true for Dr. Briselli as well, sort of this idea of, at a certain point, you are your own best judge. This is your nervous system, your body, and so go ahead and use it in the way that's correct for you. So that's what I hear from your story here.
No, I completely agree, and that's where I sort of have landed, that I don't know if it's a consequence of me doing this exercise so extensively over the years, but or if it's been, or if it's actually become some kind of, I've been primed to perhaps do it myself. But these days, I will continue the story in a minute, but these days I do it pretty rarely, not so often.
Right.
But I have this understanding that I want to do it more often,
Yeah.
but I'm not.
Yeah.
On the other hand, it's the vibrations and can actually start on their own. I don't have to lie on the mat. I can just sit at the meeting and feel that, okay, now tremors it would be nice to tremor, and then it starts to tremor.
I see.
And that I don't, and it can also be if I get tensed, or if I, for some reason I'm afraid, or I become scared or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty soon after that instance, I can start to tremor for just a few seconds, and then it's off, and I'm not at all in that situation again. If that is what we in Sweden call sugar pills, or if it's an actual effect on my system,
right.
I do not know, will never know, and I honestly don't care, because it's really, I welcome the tremor when it happened.
Right.
So could be you're driving a car, and this of course doesn't happen every day, but say that, super brake, close call, 100% I will start to shiver a couple of seconds, and then it's gone.
Yeah.
And this I welcome, but to be fair, I don't know if it's a learned behavior, in a way unaware, sort of, or if it's actually, super spontaneous. And I don't know. Have you any idea about this?
I use that same example with driving all the time. That's what I tell a lot when I share with my students. I say, it's not once you know how to tremor, it's common that it might show up in spontaneous ways more frequently. Like as you say, in a meeting. But the example I always give is the one that you just gave, which is that now. And this is especially true if I'm kind of regular with my practice, like, tremoring once per week or more than that even. I'm like you. I'm a bit variable in my own practice these days. I kind of know when I need it, but doesn't mean I always do it when I need it, but I can tell when I need it. But the more active I've been, the more likely that spontaneously I'm going to have just a few seconds. And the example I always give is the same one. You're driving and something kind of happens and you just organically do a little shake. And my own interpretation, I mean, you're right. I don't know if that's a learned or response at some level, but I don't believe that personally. I believe that it's a natural impulse that is more likely to happen when we've in a sense reminded ourselves that tremor response is not so far from the surface, so to speak. So that's my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I like to go to that sort of thought space too, and that's my chosen interpretation, but I'm not sure, but I want it to be like that. So
yeah.
So, and then at times after these years, with these life-defining moments, as I call them, integrating TRE, or at least performing it massively. Now I have the feeling that I think I can say it's integrated into my way of life, but still on occasion I enter periods of time, month, where I get super stressed and I get this feeling again coming, in the chest.
Yep.
But these days I recognize it. Now I know, hello, dear friend, here you are again. This, almost like this Iron Man power cell in the chest.
Right.
And this, I used to call it to my close, my wife, that I have something like a nuclear power plant in my chest. That with that I can move mountains.
Yeah.
I had this super belief that I could really push through whatever,
Right.
like the hero personality sort of. I can
Yeah.
take on a lot of challenges and I will just keep on pushing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But now, being another version of myself, I know that that power cell is nothing but, you know, anxiety and worry and fear, and not so, it's not negative, but it's definitely not constructive. So TRE helped me, of course, in together with therapy,
Yeah.
but I would say from a bodily perspective, mainly TRE actually
Yeah.
provided me with an understanding of how my body should feel when I am in a calm state.
I see.
And I do not believe I felt that before activating the TRE and all these kind of
Right.
procedures. So for me,
Right.
that was a completely new and life-changing experience. That how can my body feel when the power cell is turned off?
Yeah. Quieted or regulated. Yeah.
And that brings me, perhaps it's also, you can notice it on the screen, even speaking about the turning off of that sets me off in a relief.
Yeah. I see it. I see it.
And that's pretty strong, actually. I kind of like that. And that's the power of TRE, I would say, for at least personalities like me.
Right. Right.
And I do now, more often than not, of course, there is failure in anything, in every, more often than not, I can detect that, oh, something is turning on again in the chest.
Mm.
And more often than not, I can, ignite my awareness of what's going on right now. Why are you activating your safety-seeking patterns? Are you trying to perform your way to connection, or are you actually afraid of stating your mind in whatever sensitive topics at work, or what are you fearing? And then sort of slow down, and that's good for me, at least. So
yeah.
and I actually would say, for me, in my workbook, TRE helped me a lot with exactly this kind of process.
Yeah.
That's one reason why I at times feel that I want to have more of TRE in my life, but I'm a little bit on a journey where I right now in this actual year is going on a little bit high tension journey again, a little bit up. So I am aware that I need to try to slow down and all this self-talk, but it's really not happening. So we'll see what it's
No,
a journey. We're all going up and down.
It's a journey. Well, if you're okay with it, let's shift the conversation. So, I mean, to me, that's I knew maybe 10% of that story from, I knew some of those things, but to me, it was fascinating to hear some of these defining chapters. And this was such a good explanation of how you learned that there was something going on under the hood, as we say, and then developed some major insight around it, as well as a tool, in your case, tremoring, that would certainly provide a regulation, and the awareness goes with it. So I loved hearing that story, but I'm wondering, let's shift the conversation, if we can, to your view, how you apply this to others, because of course, you're a TRE provider. You're also, doing this advisory work. That might be what the stress you just mentioned is, because you're sort of a startup advisory firm, if I understand it correctly. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. You've learned a lot for yourself personally. What's your sense of the application of this to others? How are you supporting others to develop some of this awareness? How do you see stress management being important within leadership or organizational context. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and it's of course absolutely strictly personal thoughts, but that I have to answer it in two parts, or at least parallel tracks, because one, not going back to the other topic, we are hitting a new chapter here, but you know what, Alex, I had these endless bookshelves of advanced books in psychology and stress and trauma and everything. As I mentioned before, I was super focused on the other person.
Right.
Working, helping, adjusting. And I was in a professional role where my work was to engage in other individuals, trying to motivate them to provide assistance to our security system, whatever it could be.
Right.
So I picked and choose from a variety of professional sectors around me. Could be headhunters, psychologists, psychotherapists, could be stress and trauma coaches, whatever tool, theory, experience, or I had the privilege of listening in, tuning it, stealing it, sort of, and integrating it to an optimal method to convince another person that you need to do this for us now.
I see.
So what was fascinating was that I had access to all this knowledge, but I failed completely to direct it to myself.
I see.
I was completely consumed by understanding the other individual, the other end of the relationship.
Right. I see.
I think that's an important background comment for me to be able to answer your follow-up question, because I'm not sure that TRE would have helped me if someone had tried to provide it to me 2 years before the hospital.
Yep.
Yes, I would have, because I wasn't, there were no landing space for anything related to myself.
I see.
So when answering your question of how do I integrate this now in my practice, so to speak, or in my professional work,
yeah,
it has given me an understanding of the dimension of the body that I didn't have before, and it has increased my understanding of myself, spiritual, mentally, and also emotionally, but very much also physically.
I see.
And this is important for me when I, since a number of years, assist. It changed the way I operated, and it changed the way I worked.
Right.
I believe that some third party would have described Petter as someone who is deeply sensible and has a well tried and tested capability of connecting to people. However, what I know now with this integrated and other modalities, it was absolutely nothing of where I with support have ended up today.
Sure.
So to try to sum up, the first answer is I'm very careful not to impose or suggest solutions or fix me kind of theories until I'm 100% aware that there is a landing. There is some room.
Receptiveness in a way.
Yeah, and for me, this is a very important thing. I think, this is an important answer actually when you ask me this question. And I go to more practical detail. If I look at some of the clients I've been given the possibility to assist, you do this more or less every day. I do this on a very passive level, I would say. It's not my main job.
Right.
But at times, and it happens not so rare, I'm approached and they want to learn TRE and they want help.
Yeah.
And then, of course, as you and your colleagues and your fellow pod listeners know, every individual is unique. So for me, my first lens is often the safety-seeking pattern lens. What kind of individual am I meeting?
Yeah.
And so that's my first sort of lens. I come from the Centaur tradition with Dr. Sandy Cotter in Bath, UK, and she's a UK-US psychotherapist. Absolutely wonderful, Sandy Cotter, and her Centaur coming from the Reikan and bioenergetic tradition. So that's where I have my training, so to speak.
Yep.
But adding TRE to that and the body perspective, I apply and suggest TRE only when I think it can be taken on board. I'm not so. I seldom suggest it by on a chance. I've met a few individuals who have this super controlled behavior, high level of control in their way of life and in their body and their self-image.
Right.
I've learned that TRE is you have to work with other things to prepare them for TRE, because it's all about control in a way.
Yeah.
And the TRE, to be really successful, you are in a way learning to lose control.
That's right.
And so that's sort of one aspect. If it's a highly controlled individual, I perhaps do not introduce TRE just like that.
Yeah, as the first thing. Yeah.
As the first thing. So that's, well, one thing for me, I've learned at least.
Yeah.
How can we integrate it? Then I do it at a yoga studio, where I have performed it at the yoga studio. We have since moved, switched where we live, so doesn't happen anymore. And that's a fascinating way of providing TRE, because even if you have a small chat with all the participants before they enter the room, you really can't check, into detail who is actually lying on these mats.
Right.
What do they carry?
Right.
So you really need to be cautious and careful when providing for even small groups. And I think it's very important to be careful here, and lots of check-ins and also pay close attention to all of the mats. And it's very good if you can have a second assistant or an instructor also well trained. So that's for sure one thing. So do I integrate it into my everyday work, which would be advising leadership teams or managers on modern and digital risk? Not so much. Would I like to introduce it in some kind of program where we assist? Yes. Is there a landing strip for this? Who knows? More now than before, I would say.
Right.
Sweden, where I live, it's definitely a topic on the rise.
Right.
What topic, you wonder? The topic of release.
Yeah.
There are definitely among C-suite individuals, organizational leaders or strategic leaders of sorts, a narrative about getting that small, super focused release from tension.
Right.
Here, I think perhaps TRE could be something, but we're not there yet. So,
right.
Perhaps who knows? I think, for instance, my Ulrika, the woman I love and live with since 5 years, she's now setting up a hot yoga studio or a wellness center in our village here, where we will provide TRE.
Great.
The angle of her studio will be much more of a functional wellness profile. the CrossFit community,
Right.
or any one of those other communities who typically wouldn't encounter TRE if
They wouldn't find this, right?
So for us, it's an interesting laboratory to see what we can do with
Yeah.
that.
Well, just a quick comment as I think about, the question, is there a landing strip, for organizational settings or things like that? One thought that crosses my mind is something that I've been appreciating in recent years, is in terms of application of TRE, is that we're starting to see more uses where we could look at it either as a response to something, a response to trauma, a response to high stress, a response to burnout, something like that. And we could also look at it as not as a response, but as a preventative. So a proactive or a preventative approach, maybe in the spirit of resilience building or capacity building. And so I'm starting to, not only for myself, but other providers and trainers, I'm hearing this language used more. And I find that it's resonating with some audiences, and podcast listeners here will know we've spent, over this past year, we did a project where we trained a number of TRE providers at the New York Fire Department, one of the, world-class fire department in terms of their training and education. And part of the feedback that we get is, yes, they love to, for people who've had, who are at risk of burnout, or it's been very powerful, but their belief, as they now implement it into their basic training for all probationary fire department officers, their hypothesis is that this will develop a resilient skill that might actually prevent or give some people some nervous system awareness and tools before there's a lot of impact. And I kind of like thinking of it that way. So I kind of wonder if you've thought about that distinction a little bit.
Yeah, I have, definitely, especially in my own case. You have to remind me also of another client, but please help me remember that.
Sure.
So the other thing, again, if Petter version 1, if it's okay to say that, not being too self.
No, I think that's a good way to say it.
So if I, for some reason, had learned TRE before my crash,
right,
but sticking to the same safety-seeking pattern in my motherboard as a human,
right,
the way I operate on a deeper level,
yep,
adding TRE to that would most likely have extended. I've been in that way. I've most likely have been more resilient in a way,
right,
but still on an unhealthy track, if you follow me.
I see.
So that would have brought me, perhaps, or most likely, another tool to keep on going and endure even more.
I see.
Yep. That would be my spontaneous. So, but I'm thankful for being introduced to TRE after the crash, where I had come to an understanding that I'm operating with safety-seeking patterns that are provided to me by myself and my external world as a child,
right,
and they're not necessarily healthy for me, however functional they are,
right,
in my adult life. And when that has crashed, bringing in TRE actually changed a lot for me, connecting to the body.
right.
If that's an answer, Alex.
Yeah. No, I think it's a really interesting question. Is if you did the preventative use, is there a risk of it just becoming a strategy that enables continued? Does it just delay? And in your case, it sounds like that easily was a risk. My guess is maybe not everybody. There's probably a both and here, in a way.
And then going back to the other question, because now memories come when we sit and speak. I have had a few clients where they've been victimized with absolute severe traumas, as a really hard traumas coming in, bam, like that into their life.
Right, right.
Not necessarily, sexual assault or anything like that, but super hard events for them. And I recall one individual not too many years ago. I think actually it was just last summer. Well, stressed brain, no sense of time. But there was a very tough situation in the family involving potential death.
Okay.
And it also, there was a bridge also to the childhood.
Okay.
So there was a bit of a complex situation, but the actual traumatic event turned on a light in a certain room in that personality.
I see.
Both the past and the absolute horrific present.
I see.
In that case, in those super acute cases, now when I look back, I think I had not so many of these, but perhaps 3 clients, really tough situation, where I actually have decided to move on with TRE almost instantly. And it all worked extremely well, bringing them down to a level of vibration within themselves where we can actually communicate orally, but I can also connect with them. There is something to connect. It's not chaos.
Right, right.
In a way, TRE have helped me to provide a sense of order in the other person, so I can connect.
Right. Sure.
So in those 3 cases, I would say that was the first thing we did, actually.
Yeah, interesting.
And I would most likely do that again in that kind of extreme scenario.
Yeah, no, I'm reflecting on my own experience, and I'm a little similar to you, which is that part of my role, TRE and tremoring fits within, several other tools that I work with, and I'm continuously sort of evaluating, usually by instinct and often in collaboration, with the person, but in a way intuiting, well, what's the right starting point, and sometimes tremoring would be too much too soon, and so there's a laying a foundation, or there's other things. But I'm in agreement with you that sometimes it's like, no, there's something that will be very efficiently processed and re-regulated using tremoring. So I like hearing your own example, and then this idea of connection. A comment, people always ask, well, what do people say when they, what do they say about the experience of tremoring? And I would say, well, people often feel more grounded. They often feel this way. But for a while, I was running groups, and where I would always ask everybody in the room what their response was. And I started to keep a list of sort of some of the most common sentiments, and certainly relaxed, grounded. These are common terms. But probably right up there at the top of the list was, I suddenly feel, when I came here, I sort of felt separate. Now I feel like I'm part of a group. Now I feel that I can connect with the people around me. And I found that very interesting, that there was sort of this, that so commonly tremoring as a process could in the space of 45 minutes or less, create this kind of a shift where suddenly we don't feel like a solo in the room, so to speak, but we can feel the others that are there. To me, that's a very interesting thing.
Yeah, I would say for me, it's the power strength of TRE is when I combined it in a one-to-one coaching session where we're going pretty deep, so to speak.
Right.
That's sort of a that's the TRE provides some superpowers into those kind of sessions.
Right.
because you really calm the other individual down. You open up in another way. And also, of course, by providing TRE in a correct manner, you also connect in a way, body to body.
Right. That's right.
Leading the way to deeper conversation.
Right.
So I really think it's a power tool for those kind of circumstances. Is that for anyone? Is that for every provider? No, of course not. If you're not into this kind of work, definitely not something to even try, but we're all different.
Right.
Me personally, providing TRE in a yoga classroom with 20 or 12 or whatever mats, super nice, super fun.
Yeah.
But for me personally, not so. Yeah, I can do it, but it's not really.
Right. You prefer the one-on-one.
Yeah, I think that's my personality, where I need to, again, be a little bit aware of why is it like this, Petter, and why do you seek yourself? Why do you find yourself in those deep one-to-ones?
Right.
So that's, I think every provider needs to
find that for themselves.
Find that, and also dare to critique themselves, and why is it so that I end up in this kind of situations and stuff like that? Because we all have these safety-seeking patterns, and the more we turn on the awareness on, the better, I think, and it never ends. So
yeah. Well, Petter, we could probably go another 45 minutes, but I want to respect our time boundaries. So let's bring things to a close for today.
Can I just say one thing? I forgot.
Of course you may.
It's been sitting here for a few minutes.
Right.
And I tried to remember it, and now I have. The thing is, one place or sector where I absolutely believe that TRE could do wonders, it's in the universities, in the first what do you call it, semesters.
Yeah, I agree.
That would be something, if I could wish one thing for TRE or similar modalities to make their way into, what do you call it, freshman years or whatever.
Yeah, the first year of university or freshman year of college. Yep.
I have some simple dialogue with a few schools. There are traction in this theme. I would I would happy to send out a message to fellow providers and others that schools today, at least in Europe, they are on a journey where they are expected to take more responsibility for the health of their students.
Right.
That factor integrates into the value of the school.
Right.
So the timing is good to approach schools and universities and try to get this in place, at least for a test period. I would like to make a let's do it message to all of us.
I love that. Wonderful. Well, Petter, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation today.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And thank you for your patience, and also with my Swinglish.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Redbeard Embodiment Podcast. To learn more, visit us at redbeardsomatictherapy.com or send me an email at alex@redbeardsomatictherapy.com. If today's conversation resonated with you, help spread the word by subscribing and sharing with others. Hope to see you next time.